And I always say that, like, I'm so rarely telling people anything they don't know. I'm just like giving them a language and a framework to kind of understand what they've always known, but never kind of really fully allowed.
Man of Mastery episode 83 with Erin Claire Jones. Hey, I just want to say I super appreciate you guys being here, and I know you're here for growth ultimately. This is a show where we talk to guests, subject matter experts, the best in the world in all domains of human development, of growth, the 6 pillars of growth. Everything from, if you remember Tom Shea, he's got to be one of the toughest physically and mentally out there in the world. Went through Bud's Navy SEAL Hell Week 5 times, his 5th time before he got through successfully. I don't know anybody else like that. And then at the other end of the spectrum, today's guest, Erin Claire Jones, in emotional, psychological, intuitional self-awareness and applying that in relationships, in family, in work, in teams. So the spectrum is amazing. I'm so grateful for you guys and so grateful for the incredible guests we get to learn from here. So before we jump in and I introduce what today's episode with Erin is all about, a couple quick orders of business. One, I want to say thank you to Erica, who wrote the following review on iTunes, which says, Michael highlights all aspects of health and more in this can't miss podcast. The host and expert guests offer insightful advice and information that is helpful to anybody that listens. Thank you so much, Erica. That means a lot, and it means so much for you guys to reinforce and give feedback on what we're doing here. So I continue to know it's headed in a direction that's helpful to all of you. Second, this one's going out a little bit late this week. Typically, I get these out on Thursdays. Yesterday, I was tied up in something important to me, which was meeting with a pipeline of candidates who are going into the Modern Day Night project. I haven't done my debrief for you guys on that yet, but if you don't know what that is, if you're a guy, a man really aged 25 to 55, who is sort of no longer willing to accept all the stories you've been telling yourself and kind of where you're at, and you need a little bit of a spark. You need something to hit that next level. You need to maybe refresh or add to the community of fathers and men that you're willing to surround yourself with and willing to work to put yourself within. Then reach out to me and let's talk about it. Let's talk about Modern Day Night. So yesterday I had a chance to meet with Antonio, Brandon, Jonathan, and Scott, who are training for and are candidates in the pipeline for Modern Day Night. Four awesome, incredible men. They're doing amazing work on themselves and the commitment they've got to themselves and their families and each other to get into and go through that process. It's just so impressive. I've got so much respect for those guys, and it was an honor to meet with them yesterday, which is getting this one out a little bit late. So forgive me for that, but I think you're really going to enjoy Erin Claire Jones. I don't know if there's such a thing as coincidence or not. We definitely seem to have recurring themes in our lives, I would propose, and certainly in the themes and guests we run across in this podcast. So just a few episodes ago, Paul Shepard came on, and we talked about something I'd never heard about before, human design. And it just so happens I had Erin booked, and Erin is also an expert in human design. So this was an amazing opportunity to revisit that topic, peel it back, and dig a little deeper into it. Erin's a leadership coach. She works with executives, other leaders, and she uses the human design system in what she says is to help people perform at the top of their games, both personally and professionally. And she talks about the origin of human design. So we'll learn about that in today's episode. It's it's a synthesis of some ancient stuff, ancient and mystical, and maybe modern behavioral sciences. So think, I don't know, Myers-Briggs meets astrology, something like that, right? So, is this stuff real? I don't know. But more importantly, and I think Erin asked a great question today, is it helpful? So what we're going to do today is dive into, she's going to pull up a live analysis at an overview level of my behavioral footprint, my emotional, psychological, and sort of energetic way of being, working, leading, communicating, interacting. And we'll compare and contrast that a little bit to her own, which is a different type or style within human design. So have a listen. It's super interesting. And if you listen through the episode and you're interested in doing the same with Erin, going through a personalized blueprint with her or some of her other services, she's got a very generous 10% off discount offer for the Man of Mastery community at the end of this episode. All right, that's what we're going to cover today. Let's jump in with Erin Claire Jones. All right, we are recording, Erin. Thank you so much for coming on today. I'll let you explain a little bit more of your background, but I know Erin Claire Jones is you're a leadership coach and you specialize in human design, which I'm super excited to talk to you about today. And I love your energy from the podcast I've seen you in. I know you've done dozens and dozens, and you've been in Forbes and a lot of different wellness publications, but super excited to learn from you today. But I'm just also excited for our audience on what I hope is a really good fit, for people that are on this self-improvement journey, this pursuit, the never-ending pursuit towards self-mastery in life. And part of that is just becoming better versions of ourselves, becoming better leaders, partners, whether that's in business and our personal lives. I know you work with both individuals, small businesses, startups, entrepreneurs, executives and corporations. So you do so much, and I think it's going to be a great fit for our audience. I'm super excited and welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here.
Well, my pleasure.
Yeah.
Do you want to say more about your background and how you
Sure.
came to human design and what you do with leaders?
Yes, of course. So, my name is Erin, and I work with a system called Human Design, which basically is based on your exact time, date, and place of birth, which I know might seem a little bit woo-woo for some of the people here, but really, it gives us basically like an energetic blueprint to how we're each designed to make decisions and operate at our best. And even though it can come from the stars in some ways, the information itself is like so tactical, so grounded, so simple, which is why I fell in love with it. So, my work is primarily with individuals, with partnerships, and with teams to kind of give them the blueprint to how they're designed to operate at their best. And I think part of why I fell in love with human design is I think so often we're inundated with information, but then we have like no idea what to do with it. And I think human design gives us the self knowledge, but also the tools to actually just like take action and integrate it really deeply into our lives. I've been working with human design since 2015. I came from a startup background. I worked for many different teams and was so inspired by the people that I worked with, but also just like so kind of astounded by the dysfunction. It just felt like they were like amazing people, but they just like didn't totally know how to work together. And my obsession was always just like in the people. And I felt like there was just like not a real harmony. And so when I discovered human design, it was like my actual first application of it was like, we can use this to make teams so much more functional, because the more we understand how differently each person operates, the more functional we'll be as a unit, whether that is how we parent, how we partner, how we work together. So it's been a really wild journey sharing it over the 6 years. I can't say the world was ready for it at the beginning, but it's really been amazing to watch it take off since really 2017, 2018, where there's been such receptivity, just a receptivity to it in general.
Wow, that's fantastic. Okay, so I hadn't even thought about that. So beyond just understanding ourselves better, we can start to understand each
People.
other better from the same
Yes.
modeling perspective and how to interact and how to work as a team. That's fantastic.
100%.
Yeah, and so I mentioned to you off air, we just recently had a guest on, Paul Shepard, who mentioned human design, and at the time I was sort of thinking it was something else, but things have just aligned here to almost carry on from that conversation where it was mentioned, and now to explore for myself and the audience more about what human design is and everything you just described. What does this really look like? So there's been a couple times where I've been a live subject on air on a recorded podcast. One was a voice coach. But yeah,
Oh
I'm happy
gosh.
to volunteer myself here if we can actually dig into some detail and
Yeah.
talk about how human design works, what that would look like with me
Hmm.
as one example. And I'd love to, if we can explore a little bit of that by way of explaining human design to people. Also talk about how I'd use that not only for myself, but then how I would
Mm,
use it in a team setting or with a
hmm
partner, with a family.
Totally. That sounds great.
Okay. Can we
And I
talk?
think, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, you go.
Well, no, I don't want to detract from what you're about to say, but before we dive in, I'd also love to learn a little bit more about where human design came from as a system.
Totally. So the origins are quite mystical. It's always quite funny sharing this with the companies that I work with. But basically, human design is a channeled system, which means that, so it's been around since 1987. The founder, who's no longer alive, his name was Ra Uhuruhu, and he basically was in Ibiza and was walking home one night and heard a voice. And the voice was like, it's time to work. And for basically 8 days and 8 nights, he literally received all this information. He spent the next 20 years building it out, and it's like such a depth of knowledge that, like, it really is a lifelong study. It's not a thing that you can master even studying in 5 years. Like, there's so many layers to it. It keeps going deeper. But I think what I always want to remind people of, only because I know those origins can be mystical, some people might be like, whoa, is that, like, for me, it doesn't actually quite matter. Like, the question I ask people is not, is this true? But like, is it helpful? Like, I'm never
Mm,
trying to like convince people to believe me, but I find that, like, the more I share it, especially with the skeptics, they're like, oh my God, this resonates with me so deeply. Tell me everything. And so I just want to like kind of put that out there at the beginning. If you're listening, you feel a little bit skeptical, a little bit hesitant, like, this is a tool, as there's so many tools. So like, take what resonates, leave the rest, but it really is meant to be a tool that really kind of empowers and supports people. And for me, it's the greatest tool that I've found, and just like giving people permission to be themselves and remind them that they're designed to operate so differently than most people. And the more they lean into that and more honor it, the more success they have.
awesome. So
Yeah,
I think the guest who mentioned it to me and to our audience a few weeks ago had mentioned how much exploration he had done in his personal life, in his business life, and just so many systems that maybe didn't resonate. And then when he found and explored human design in the matter of a couple of hours, all of a sudden it
totally.
was, to your question, is this helpful? It was the most helpful thing that he had found.
100%. People are just like, and it's so funny because a lot of clients buy like one of my offerings for like for their partners or people that like don't know their human design of their team, and they just like read this document, which is like a written guide to their design, and they're like, has she been reading my diary? Has she been following me around? And it's just so funny because like I just try to make it super practical, and they're like, how does she know? So like there is just this amazing validation it gives us of like, wow, like I actually have always known these things about myself, but I never allowed myself to step into it. And I always say that,
Mm,
like, I'm so rarely telling people anything they don't know. I'm just like giving them a language and a framework to kind of understand what they've always known, but never kind of really fully allowed. And that was my experience, similar to Paul. Like, I heard my human design and all I felt was relief. I was like, I have spent my entire life trying to be everything but that. Do I really get to be that? Do I really get to feel good doing that? So it really just gives people such acceptance, which I so appreciate.
that's amazing. Is it so this download that happened to the gentleman in 1987? Is it a synthesis of other
Yes.
systems?
Yeah. So the way that he received it was that it was a quantum system and pulled from a lot of different ancient, and modern modalities. So including, the I Ching, which is a really big piece of it, astrology, the chakra system, Kabbalah, even like quantum physics, genetics, biochemistry. Like, he was just like, it kind of pulls together all these systems to give us a blueprint to how we're designed to operate at our best. And I think different than a lot of the other kind of modalities out there, like, Enneagram or Myers-Briggs, which by the way, I think are like amazing systems. It's not like self-diagnosed, so the idea is that it's not really just about who we think we are, but like it kind of reveals all the energetics and stuff that's underneath the surface as well, which I think is so much of the magic of human design. Is kind of giving us a language for like the unconscious dynamics that have been at play both individually and in relationship. Does that make sense?
It does. I think if I relate it to something like a Myers-Briggs that we see used corporately so frequently, it does feel like a very accurate description.
Totally.
But it's four letters and each is binary, and then maybe
Yeah.
I get sort of like a dozen bullet points out of it that, yeah,
Yeah.
that seems pretty spot on, but I'm not sure what to do with it after that.
Totally. And again, like, I actually love these systems. Like, I love kind of all these personal development systems. I think the difference is that, like, we're not answering questions based on like why, assessing who we are. And sometimes those, I know for me, it's shifted based on the phase I'm at in my life, why I'm
Right.
answering the questions, who they're for, and there's something just like so direct about like exact time, date, place of birth. But again, like, I just want to say that like human design is not predictive. It's not going to tell you that like this will happen when you're 40 and you'll meet this person then. It's more about just like getting you acquainted with your operating system so that you can kind of flow with it rather than resist it.
Awesome. Well, so why don't we dig into it a little bit? Can you
Cool.
tell me, or do you know, or do we know why time, place, date of and time, like down to the minute of birth, is so important? How does that factor in?
Similar to astrology, it's based on kind of like our imprint. It's like when we're born, it's like based on like what's going on with the planets and what's going on in the world, kind of just like our imprint, and it kind of just like informs our operating system. And again, it doesn't mean that like you're going to do this or be this thing, but it does mean that like this is maybe how you best navigate life, and so, but yeah, it is so much around kind of where the planets are in the sky and what's going on, like the precise minute that you're born. And if you don't know your exact time, you can, what I'll do with clients is I'll kind of check throughout the day and see how much it shifts. Sometimes some like really big things stay consistent, the more precise pieces shift. So just like know that if you don't know your exact time, we can kind of always explore what remains consistent and what doesn't.
Okay. Yeah, that kind of answers part of my question because I just think about like a minute is sort of granular, but it's sort of
Oh yeah.
not, right? Like you look at when you're in the room and a baby's born, are
Yeah,
they really down to the second, or at some point somebody turns around and looks at probably like an analog clock on the wall,
totally.
right? And it may not even be right. And then what if, how far apart were twins and the way they record their time of birth and things
Totally.
like that.
Yeah. It's not like your whole design just like flips like 30 seconds by 30 seconds. It's just like there's
Right.
kind of like a slow evolution. So like there might be some pieces that do shift like every couple minutes, but like the most important pieces will actually remain consistent for quite a bit. And also like it's so funny because birth is often not a time where parents are like super looking at the clock. They're probably just like, so it is some people can really struggle to find it, but I think that we can always explore the possibilities in that case.
Super cool. So I know you have a website, right? So as people start to hear this episode, get curious and follow up with it, they can actually go in and they can plug
Yes.
in that information that you just mentioned, as I did actually this morning. And then I
Yeah.
think you just took mine. So what ends up coming up is looks pretty mystical to me. It looks super confusing to me.
So
But
confusing,
I think
right?
part of where you go from there is in helping people understand what that means, start to talk about it. All I know is it said I am a manifesting generator, and then
Crazy.
there's a lot
Yeah.
of other detail here.
Yeah, it's really not a very intuitive looking thing. People will look it up and they're like, whoa, we're actually working kind of like redesigning some pieces to make it a bit more accessible, but it's not, there's so much information held in that. But again, it's not like an immediately intuitive thing. So if you do want to look up your design, you can go to erinclairejones.com/lookup and know that while it looks very complex, the most important pieces to know are your type, your strategy, and your inner authority. And I know we'll kind of talk about these things for you, but so people know, the type is basically around how you're designed to best use your energy. The strategy is basically around how you're designed to best create opportunities for yourself. And your inner authorities around how you're designed to best make decisions. There are about a billion pieces beyond that, but honestly, just aligning with those three can be so transformative and so impactful. Do you want to go into those things for your design?
Yeah, let's do it. And I'm going to apologize, probably getting some background noise here, but this is like life happening as it does during podcasts. So bear with me. Just one question on that. So type, strategy, inner authority are super important. Um, there are a couple things that pop up here, like profile, which
Mhm.
seems to have a numerical like 4 out of 6. Is that a grade? Did I just get
I
graded? Am I
know, I know. It's actually like not a fraction. It's
okay?
like because you could it's called a 4-6. So
Four
basically
slash six.
we all have a profile which is around how we're kind of uniquely wired to manifest our purpose. And there are 12 different profiles that are made
Okay,
up of a combination of six numbers. So it's like a 6-2, a 1-3, a 3-5, a 4-6.
got it.
Also a really important piece, like probably would be, I'd put that like maybe fourth after the type strategy authority.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to hear more. What does this all mean to you?
Okay, so the tight piece, and I'll talk a little bit about my design too, only because I've got like a quite opposite one, just so I think people
Okay.
can kind of get a taste of the differences. So,
Yeah, great. And
um,
and can we talk about, since we are so opposite, what would that look like if we're on a team working together?
yes, totally, yes. So yes, it'd be really probably disappointing if you expected me to operate like you. So you are a manifesting generator. So basically, there are five different types in human design: manifesting generators, projectors, reflectors, and manifestors. Manifesting generators make up the majority of the population. And this in no way means they're not unique. It's the first distinction, but these are kind of like our energy beings. So I'm going to talk specifically about being a manifesting generator, but like if you're a generator, you're probably going to resonate with a good amount of this, and some of it will really apply to you as well. So basically being a manifesting generator means that like you really are meant to have like the energy and the life force to kind of like build, create, make things happen. An ideal day for you would be one where you kind of wake up in the morning with a full tank of energy. You use up your energy throughout the day in ways that just feel like satisfying, exciting, and fun. And you kind of drop into bed like exhausted and fulfilled and wake up energized. Part of the magic of being a manifesting generator is that you're kind of meant to be multi-passionate by nature. You're not really meant to just be like, this is my lane, I'm sticking with it for 40 years. It's very much like, ooh, I want to do a podcast. Ooh, I want to do this now. Like you're just like kind of here to like keep creating and being inspired. And you're not really here to like stick with anything longer than you actually have the energy for it. So giving yourself permission to kind of pivot and move on when the energy is no longer there. I'd also say that one of your gifts as a manifesting generator is really efficiency. Like you might find the quickest way to get from A to Z, but in doing so, you might skip a few steps along the way. So if you're going to like have support around you, it's probably people that can like handle the step-by-step process in a way that really empowers you to kind of just like remain in your own powerful and creative flow. I would say one piece of kind of advice I would offer any generator or manifesting generator is just that like is around boundaries. Like because you have such natural vitality and energy and life force, people can really want to take advantage of it. And one of your biggest lessons is really prioritizing your satisfaction and excitement. And knowing the more lit up and excited you are by how you use your energy each day, the more energy you have, the more you uplift everyone around you and the more magnetic you become. And I would say, as a leader, as a manifesting generator, do not expect people to keep up with you. You're probably going to be quite disappointed or do as much as you. Just like, so I worked with a manifesting generator client recently, and she had gone through 7 assistants because she was like expecting each of them to like move as fast and do as much as her. And the minute she like appreciated that like they brought a really different gift to the table, the more harmonious it became. So you can kind of start to see the differences. So before I go into more, how does that all feel to you? This is your first time hearing anything about human design, so be
Yeah,
honest.
it sure is. Like this is definitely like live on the fly type of stuff. No,
Right.
it does, it does really resonate. Finding that patience with others for pace. I have a buddy that keeps asking me like, how do you do as much as you do? And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I just do it. Um, the part about prioritizing, would an example of that be, as these demands are coming in for my time and my energy, learning to say no to things?
100%.
Like that's something I've had to try to focus on.
Yeah, it's like it's saying yes when like you feel so, and we'll talk a little bit about this when we talk about the authority and making decisions, but it's like saying yes when you feel so like excited, expanded, energized by the thing, and knowing that like if it's not that, it's not going to benefit anyone. So like never
Yeah.
saying yes just because you think you should. And like even though it's super hard to say no, it's like I've actually got to be healthily selfish in this way because I know that like when I'm really a full body yes, like everyone benefits. And if it's anything but that, it's probably not going to be the right thing right now.
For everybody, right? And as far as that, you almost sort of characterize my day. Waking up very energetic and literally just going until I fall down in the bed, right? Whether that's early, late, or
Right.
somewhere in between, right? Um, does that inform maybe sort of how I should structure my day as well, in terms of maybe creative tasks, doing things that are better suited
Yeah.
in the morning when I have more energy versus later in the
Yeah.
day?
I would say that like, and you'll probably know when the energy's gone, when you're just like, I'm pooped, and maybe it's like 10 p.m. or maybe it's like 3 p.m. It doesn't mean that you've got
Right.
to be just like pushing so hard every day. And also when you're doing things that excite you, it can also include like, I'm with a friend that really lights me up. I'm like exercising in a way that like just brings me so much joy. It's basically just like using your energy in ways that feel satisfying. I would say for structuring your day, and this is beyond type, like for you and your design, like having space to be in your own kind of creative and uninterrupted flow is probably going to be really important. And so
Mm.
like I would set times in your day where like you aren't going to be interfered with. And I know that you're a dad, like and you have a tea, like these things, it's like it's not like feasible 100% of the time, but even giving yourself a couple of those hours, like you've got such stamina to get things done when you really kind of like have that space of like no interruption. And one other piece I want to share around that, but how does that, do you feel that?
I do feel that I started restructuring some of my day recently into, friend and coach of mine, he calls it GSD time, get shit done time. And oftentimes for me, with everything in life, just super early in the day is really nice, quiet time
Yeah,
to get stuff done. Whatever, getting stuff done might actually be actions, but it might just be thinking, or it might be reflecting or journaling or whatever is important to me. And I
totally.
do find that, yeah, you mentioned I'll know when the energy is gone.
Yeah.
For example, when I love naps.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm tired, whether it's at the end of the day or like I feel like I want a nap, it is physically painful for me to stay awake, engage, keep going on whatever I'm
Totally.
doing beyond that. And my
Yes.
wife, she gets a real kick out of it. It's like if I say I'm going to take a nap, Like
Yeah.
I could say I'm going to take a 15-minute nap and I'll be asleep in like a minute, literally, and I'll sleep my 15 and I'm done. But
Which
that's
is a
kind of
good
how my energy's, it's like it's gone and then I've got to refresh it.
which is a good sign because I think that like often if manifesting generators or generators are not really lit up by how they're using their energy during the day, they have a hard time sleeping. They go to bed, they
Mm,
feel really restless because they haven't just like used up their motor in a way that feels good. And so often it's by like using yourself up fully that you're able to like drop into bed and be like, I'm so pooped, I'm exhausted, and I can wake up energized, you know?
okay.
One other piece I'd share for you is that you've got a, and this is beyond type as well, you've got this aspect of your design where you can be inspired by a lot. So I'd imagine that you have like a lot of ideas, you know? And if you just like kind of like follow the whims of your ideas, you might like end the day feeling like a little bit scattered, be like, nah, totally sure what I accomplished today. So like I wouldn't recommend like overly structuring things because you probably really do need to have like different stimulation each day. But like for you having very simple structure to your days of like, these are the 2 to 3 things I could do today that would leave me feeling the most satisfied at the end of the day, and like have those kind of offer a grounding force throughout the day, just knowing how susceptible you are to being inspired, but also how you can kind of like rein it in and make sure you're kind of moving in one direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It makes a ton of sense to me. Yeah. I find that, in fact, I just try to pick one thing that I
Great.
want to not even necessarily accomplish, but to move it forward a little bit in any particular day. One, like three at the most, one or two usually,
I love it.
uh, because I feel like I feel the need to make that progress in the things that I see as important to me in my life and
Hmm.
my purpose and my family and my tribe, whatever that is. And exactly what you just said, conversely, if I don't and I just nibble away at a lot of things, it doesn't feel productive.
Totally. And like, and we all have kind of signposts in our design that reveal whether we're on or off track. And a sign of being off on track for all generators and manifesting generators is satisfaction, where you
Mm,
like end the day and you're like, I just feel satisfied, you know, by like what I accomplished, what I did, I feel fulfilled. And a sense of being off track for you is frustration. So like I would say for you, if that overwhelming sense of frustration ever comes up, it's basically a signal to kind of like step back and check in and really be like, is the way that I'm showing up really working out for me here? Is this really the right use of my energy?
got it. Okay. So yeah, the properties that popped up, it actually mentions that not self theme of frustration. So that's a great
Yeah.
sign. Is what's the strategy component?
So let's talk about the strategy. And just so you, I'm just going to give you like a tidbit on my type only because
Yeah,
it's so
please,
different here.
please.
So like, so there are also projectors, manifestors, and reflectors. So as a projector, I'm not here to be a doer. You know, projectors are much better suited as like leaders and guides and managers and teachers and not here to do all the doing. And as projectors, like our energy can really operate in ebbs and flows. And we might thrive working 3 hours a day, 5 hours a day, you know, but it's really around like our gift is being really sensitive to other people's energy and really kind of
Mm,
guiding and asking the right questions and not doing all the doing. It can be so amazing to have projectors and manifesting generators on teams. But again, like if I think that I spent so much of my life trying to keep up and be a generator that like I just burnt out so quickly. So really kind of learning how to build a business as a projector, like bringing on support, not doing any of it alone, like really kind of honoring the ebbs and flows, all that stuff. So just knowing there are differences in that way. Make sense?
perfect. Yeah, thank you.
So every type will have a strategy in human design. So the strategy for both generators and manifesting generators is called waiting to respond. And it basically means that your energy is very magnetic. You're not really meant to chase after anything. Life is meant to come to you, and your work is to keep your awareness open and see what shows up in your world that sparks you. Once something that shows up and sparks you and sparks your gut, like you can like go after that thing and make it happen quicker than anyone else. But like you're just not really designed to like sit down and like come up with something out of thin air. It's like having things show up in your world, even like with Paul the other week, where it's like, ooh, human design, cool. I want to know more, you know? So it's just like you're kind of waiting for things to show up, spark you, light you up, and kind of let that guide your energy and let you know where to put it forward. And even a very simple example of this would be like with your wife, if you're choosing what to eat for dinner, like you're not really here again to come with things out of thin air. So I would suggest that she doesn't ask you what you want to eat for dinner. I would suggest that she asks you, do you want to eat this or this? Do you want to go here or here? For you to be like, yes, no, you know, you're here to just like respond to life and not really here to kind of like initiate and chase after. How does that feel? And also, most of us have been like so conditioned to like want to initiate and chase after and make it all happen. And so it can require a little bit of retraining to like, for in your case, to kind of really trust how magnetic you're meant to be.
Yeah, that feels. I suppose if I say it this way, is I find, yeah, I don't know what the creative process is for everybody, right? But yeah, I find ideas and inspiration all over the place. Oftentimes, I love
Totally.
books. Oftentimes, it's by reading. And those, yeah, they tend to spark these energetic interests, right? And then I want to chase after something if it feels right. But I think one of the things that's been hardest for me over the years that I'm only getting better at in recent years, and maybe this speaks to, there's this other item I'm looking at here called inner authority, emotional solar plexus. Um, those things that would pop up as ideas or inspirations or things that caught my attention in the past, I would process them, I think, very cerebrally, like,
Mm,
oh, would that work, or cost
totally.
benefit, or what's the business case, or I don't know, something
Right.
along those lines. Whereas over the last probably 5 years, I've spent a lot of time training, um, just investing in tuning into my intuition, tuning
Mm-hmm.
into my gut, and trusting
Mm-hmm.
it. A lot of that
Mm-hmm.
is sort of awareness and trust. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe, I don't know, does that make sense, what I'm feeling, as far as awareness not only of things
Totally.
that resonate with me, but then
Yes.
awareness to how I evaluate those or pursue them?
Yes, and the inner authority in human design is exactly that. It's how do you best assess then which opportunities are right for you? Not everything that comes is correct, you know? And so for you, your decision making is so rooted in your gut response. And there's so much talk out there like follow your gut, listen to your gut. Not all of us have that knowing or that kind of connection. I know that I don't, but for you, it's so much around the gut. And there's a nuance to it that I'll add, but it basically means that like your gut is going to give you like a very expansive yes towards something, or kind of like a contraction and pulling away. It's like this very visceral feeling in your belly, and it never comes with a reason. So exactly what you said, if you're like,
Hmm.
well, I think that I should do this because it might lead to this thing and maybe this thing will happen, not your gut. Your gut is like, feels right, doesn't, don't know why, we'll find out why later. And so much of your work is really kind of tuning into and dropping into that visceral physical knowing within your body, and knowing that your body just often knows things before you can even conceive it with your mind. So that if you're sacral authority, it's so much around just like trusting and listening to your gut response in the moment. Because you're an emotional authority and you're a manifesting generator, it means that for you, it's about trusting your gut response over time. You're not really meant to make decisions spontaneously or impulsively, especially the big ones. What I would
Hmm.
actually recommend for you is like paying attention to your gut response and then like sleeping on it and giving yourself 24 to 48 to 72 hours and check back in with your gut the next day or the next day and see if the excitement is still there. Because my guess, and maybe this isn't true for you, I know it is for me as a fellow emotional decision maker, is that like when I'm on an emotional high and a thing comes, I'm like, I'm in, let's go, I can't wait. And then I'll wake up the next day and I'm like, no, don't want to do that, like because I'm just like so prone to saying yes to everything when I'm like really on the high. And so I think as an emotional decision maker, it's so good to just like give yourself a beat and give yourself a little bit of space from that decision and see if that excitement persists. For you, it's not just about loving a decision in the moment, but loving it over time. For some people, that clarity is instantaneous in the moment, always available. For you, like you can get clear, you'll have an instinct, but I would actually recommend sleeping on it. And again, especially for the big ones, small ones, do what feels right in the moment. How does that feel?
Yeah, I think, how's that feel? That I don't recall learning that, and I can't, point back to something that, yeah, okay, that I can connect. But uh, my tendency is not to want to commit right away to
Yeah.
things, to want to sit with them and then see, how it feels like it's going to fit for everything in life.
Mm-hmm.
So that seems spot on.
Yeah.
The You also mentioned, in terms of that intuitional decision making, learning to trust it, for my type, because I may not be able to validate it in any, I don't know, sort of cognitive way. And I can
Totally.
definitely point back to some major sort of lessons, or things around intuition, more to the negative, right? Like the intuition of this
Mm.
isn't right, and
Mhm.
then trying to rationalize that somehow. Why isn't it right? And trying to
Mhm.
test it. And I couldn't, everything I was trying to test was in the positive, whereas my
Mm.
intuition was in the negative.
Mhm.
And I couldn't align the two. And I said, well, the evidence seems to be in the positive, and so go with
Yeah,
that. But in hindsight, no, you know what? My intuition said there wasn't the right fit here, even though
totally.
nothing else showed that on paper, or whatever you want to say from a business perspective.
Yes, totally. And often we can like convince ourselves in or out of anything. And so the
Hmm.
gut for you is just meant to be like a more reliable tool to kind of really assess that. You know, um, I'm just thinking about a quote, I'm forgetting the exact one, but it's something around like my I'm actually going to totally butcher it, but it basically is around like not needing to know exactly where it's going to take you, but just like trusting the feeling of like it feels right or it doesn't. And I'm not going to know exactly why now, but I will know why later, and it's so useful for you to have people around you, like your wife, like your team, like people that really understand that. So they don't kind of force you like, but why? And have you really thought about it? It's like, I have felt into it and it does feel good, and kind of like letting that be the language you use, not like convincing yourself in or out. And it's not to say that our minds are like, just like useless. It's just that like our minds are so powerful that we can often convince ourselves in or out of anything. And so human design is so much around kind of tapping us into a deeper level of knowing within us that we can use to make our own decisions, and then kind of use our minds to really kind of just like inspire others and really kind of uplift and empower other people with our insights.
Hmm. Okay. So we talked about being different types of leaders and producers. So you're a projector. I think you said that we have a similar inner authority or decision
Correct.
process. So if we're around I don't know, a board table for a corporation, we may be making decisions in similar intuitive ways. What was your I sort of skipped past the strategy piece where you mentioned mine
Yeah.
is more of a
Waiting to
magnetic,
respond.
waiting to attract. What's your strategy?
So my strategy is around waiting to be invited. So it's not just about like a thing shows up in my world and like I'm lit up by it. It's more that like somebody's like, hey, Erin, I think you'd be amazing at this. Please come do this with me. So really kind of making sure that I just feel so recognized and invited in the spaces that I'm in, and it doesn't mean that I need an invitation for everything. Like I don't need an invitation to like make art or move to a new city, but it is around like making sure the people that I work with and date and live with like just see me deeply and recognize me. Because as a reminder, like projectors aren't here to be the doers. But if you're in a situation where you're expected to be, it's going to be really disappointing. So if somebody's like, I really see your gift and I really want you to share it, it's going to feel so much better. And the one piece that I would share, just especially as an entrepreneur, when I first learned that my strategy was about waiting to be invited, I was like, how do I build a business? This feels like really not sustainable. And I learned that so much of my job as a projector is about making myself visible. And so basically, like, the first iteration of my company, I would like pitch certain companies, and it was just like, it was too much. It was not how my strategy was meant to work. And I basically made it my job to just share. I share all the time on Instagram, on podcasts, in newsletters, like, and not in a really salesy way. Like I just share what I'm inspired by, and that is what kind of really magnetizes the right people. And so I think as projectors, know that so much of your job is to kind of make yourself available so kind of the right invitations can come to you.
Interesting. And you do a great job of that. I'm glad that we got you an invitation to come on here and make this happen. So what would that mean for me as a manifester generator with a strategy that is more of a waiting to respond? What does that mean in terms of growing a business?
Yeah, it basically means like instead of like sitting, just like at your desk and being like, what do I do next? Like I've got to figure it out. It's like, let me be out in the world, see what sparks me, what excites me, and like follow where my energy wants to go. It's like this person's opportunity shows up. Great, I'm gonna reach out. Like I saw this person on Instagram. I think they'd be amazing. I'm gonna reach out. Like it's just kind of like letting your gut guide you, and also knowing that especially as a manifesting generator, like in the same way that you're meant to be lit up by how you use your energy each day, you're also meant to be lit up by like how you do business, how you hire, how you market, how you sell, how you do this podcast. Like it might look quite different than the way other people are doing it, but you're not really kind of meant to model it based on what others, but really like honor your gut to kind of take you in the right direction. So you can put yourself in front of a lot of things and see what excites you, but kind of like letting your gut actually be the final decision maker to let you know where your energy wants to go.
Well, one thing led to the next thing. It led to doing a podcast, and the podcast has been an amazing way to just meet so many different people and so many ideas and concepts, and then dive deeper on the relationships, the ideas, the training, the things
Totally.
that really kind of inspired me.
Yes, exactly. And it's just like, it's just staying aware and attuned, like there might be a point in 5 years where you're like, the podcast doesn't feel like the best use of my energy right now. What am I available for? I'm gonna like give myself permission to move on, because like I know that when I have the energy for something, it's amazing. And when I'm just forcing it, it's gonna be so much harder for it to happen. So like for you, it is kind of really honoring that constant evolution and knowing that your job is not to like figure out where you'll be in 5 or 10 years, but really kind of like continue to make the most courageous aligned decisions right now.
Awesome. What else in this sort of summary of properties or types is there anything else that jumps out at you here that would be interesting?
Yeah, so that you mentioned the profile piece earlier. So you're
Mhm.
4/6. And so basically what that means is that with anyone with a 4 in their profile, it basically means that so many of your opportunities are meant to come from like your community and your network and the people that you know. And so just like always kind of cultivating and activating your community and knowing that like it's natural for you to kind of work with friends or work with people that like are, I know that you're married, but like dating people that were friends first, or kind of being connected to people through your community. So really kind of making sure that you are investing in that. And then the 6 in your profile is so much around the fact that you really are going to be a role model and a teacher. And often these people live their life in 3 phases, where the first 30 years of your life is kind of meant to be like a lot of trial and error, bumping into things, making all the mistakes in the world, and just like experiencing as much as you can. 30 to 50 is kind of a time of like pulling back, stepping back, listening, processing all the things you learn, kind of embodying your wisdom in a deeper and deeper way. And you're actually meant to hit your prime when you turn 50. And it doesn't mean that there's like anything to wait for. It's kind of just meant to keep getting better and better and better. And there's kind of like a new embodiment where you just kind of inspire others by just being so like deeply embodied and like authentic yourself.
Perfect timing. I'll turn 50
Perfect.
this year, so that's right
Totally.
on. So my wife and I were friends before we started
Oh,
dating.
cool.
She tried to set me up with one of her friends, and that just didn't stick. And we
And then
became
with you.
friends. And
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
And
so good. Yeah. And that
yeah,
foundation of friendship. Go ahead.
I love networking. At least um, I there is something for me about wanting to network with people I want to network with,
Oh,
if that makes
100%.
any sense. And then if for
Totally.
some reason we don't just sort of share interests, then
Yeah.
I don't have that interest. But of those, I love to cultivate those. And
Totally.
through this podcast and getting to know some people, there's another gentleman I've gotten to be very good friends with over the last couple of years of
Yeah.
doing this, and we're actually looking at a business opportunity together. So
So
uh,
cool. That's
yeah.
exactly it, And I imagine the podcast is a beautiful way for you to build community. And it really is so wonderful. And you actually have community in so many other places in your design. But like I think having that like foundation of friendship before jumping into like business and romance with people is going to be probably just the thing that allows you to feel the most like interest and solid and all the things. Another piece that I would mention, there are areas of our design that are kind of like our biggest areas of learning. And they can be potential kind of shadow areas, but also just areas of potential wisdom. And so, one big area for you is around learning patience. One of your biggest shadows is applying a sense of urgency to everything that you do. And just kind of like, it's all going to happen right now, And then it's like, I'm going to do this thing and be free from the pressure, but then like the next thing will show up. And so much of your wisdom is being like, I'm going to slow down. Not everything is worth hurrying for. When it is worth hurrying for, I will make it happen quicker than anyone else. But I know that like, my job is to learn how to slow down, delegate, and not apply a sense of urgency to everything.
Yeah, I for sure. The first thing that came to mind earlier when we mentioned just what seemed like patience to me, I thought about it interpersonally, in relationships,
Mm,
business, personal, otherwise. But in what you just said, the other part of that I'm taking away is I've forced business and investment decisions in the past. It's like, you know, money is sitting idle. We
mhm,
need the next thing, or the economy is great right now. Let's do something else while it's booming, and forced something that just didn't fit. Whereas I think more
totally.
patience and kind of waiting for what the right fit would be at the right time to come along would have been a lot wiser.
100%. And you're just like never meant to make decisions from like a very pressured place. It's meant to be this like very cool, calm, grounded energy where it's like I felt into it. It feels good, but like you'll sense when it's like, let's just do it. You know what I mean? Let's just like I just like that's never really meant to guide your decision making. And of course, it will have many times likely in your life. And the lesson is to kind of learn to move away from that as like a decision maker driver. Um, Another big area of learning for you, and the little that we've talked, it feels like to me you're in the wisdom of this one, but it basically means that you are meant to be very open-minded. One of the biggest potential shadows for you is like a defensiveness and feeling a need to be certain. It's like I've got to have an opinion, I've got to back up my opinion, I've got to be super smart and consistent and certain in my opinions. And so much of the wisdom of your design is knowing that you're here to look at so many different perspectives and not lose yourself in just one. Like you have a gift for kind of seeing the nuances of layer and layers of things in a way that most people can't, which is probably really cool in this podcast environment of kind of like getting all the perspectives, all the stories. So just noticing where perhaps that defensiveness and need for certainty is showing up versus where you're kind of really embracing just like your natural flexibility, open-mindedness, and fluidity.
That's interesting. I've been pondering kind of the other extreme of that. I mean, I think not to make it like a linear spectrum, but um, recently been thinking about. So there's something you just said in there in terms of multiple perspectives. I feel like a lot of times I'll sort of, I don't know, put the dots together on something, and I end up being so early on it. like
Mm,
bleeding edge early on something, because I've seen it and I'm certain about it and I want to chase after it, but it's just, it needs more time, at least from a business
mm,
perspective, right? If you need a customer
mhm,
base, it needs wider adoption, something like that. So appreciating what you just said about the caution in one extreme.
yeah.
At the other extreme, I feel like I almost have a tendency to go too early on some things.
hmm And that's really the opportunity to kind of check in with your gut and be like, do I really have the energy for this thing right now?
Mm.
Do I really feel this like expansion, excitement, just like I've got to do this right now? I feel so freaking excited to, or does it feel like this is exciting to me, but like it's not totally right now? Because the gut is kind of meant to be a tool that a lot not only let you know where to put your energy, but also when to put it there. So I'd be
Mm.
curious in those moments, whether it's like you might see a thing, but if you checked in, if it's like, but it doesn't feel like it's time to act just yet.
Or not act. Yeah. What
Yeah.
about just sort of like communication styles around this as we start to learn each other, and how best to interact and how we each operate. So just as an example, right? The idea of things being presented that might spark me, resonate with my
Yeah.
energy, and want to pursue. Right? I feel like I react better to somebody. How would we say this? Somebody might say like, "Hey, have you ever heard of this, or have you ever thought of this?" Something more suggestive than something more prescriptive. Hey, you should do this. And
Oh
when I
yeah.
hear like you do this or you should do this, I'm automatically going like, I don't know,
Yeah.
like some defense goes up there.
100%. Well, I don't think actually none of us are designed to be told what to do. But which is good to know. But I think that like, yeah, I think one, you're here to be given options and then choose, but you also have like such powerful energy in your design that I find that those who have your design struggle a little bit working for other people and just having like other people kind of direct where their energy goes. So for you to kind of like have the freedom to choose that yourself. So I would say anybody working with you, like really kind of like giving you options, giving you things to respond to, and like letting you feel into things over time. I would say anybody working with a projector, like really recognizing their gifts, like really kind of vocalizing them, like verbally affirming them and really like inviting them in to share. And that can show up in so many different ways. So like I like to like invite you to work with me on this project, or maybe it's your kid. It's like I'd really like to like invite you to come play with me today. Like, there's so many different iterations. We haven't talked about manifestors and reflectors, but I would say in terms of communicating with manifestors, they're not here to be told what to do. And they also like tend to really dislike being pestered with questions. So with manifestors, it's often just like keeping them informed. It's like, I'm leaving, I'm coming home, this thing's empty, you know what I mean? Like, it's like letting them like do things on their own terms and in their own way and not feel like it's being controlled. And then for reflectors, it's very similar to projectors in terms of like really inviting in their perspective, recognizing their uniqueness, recognizing their gifts. And human design is so interesting in that like it is basically helping us each know how to really assess what's right for us and kind of walk a path that's really unique to us. But it is so against the idea that like somebody is going to tell you like you should do this with your life. Like you might be like, oh, that feels good, I'm in, or you might be like, that feels terrible. So like I would say for you, treat everything as a thing to respond to. If somebody's like, you should do this, you might be like, that actually feels amazing and I'm going to choose to do that, not because it's you saying it, but because it actually feels really good in my body. Or they might say it and
Yeah.
you're like, that feels terrible, really appreciate your perspective and I'm not going to act on that.
I like how you said that. So just as so for anybody who goes out to your website, plugs in their information, this really confusing chart pops up, right? And then they're going to want to talk to Erin, which is great for you. So just like a couple questions on it. I mean, I guess it sort of shows the silhouette of a person, and I could see where sort of maybe the chakra stuff comes into play, but it's got two sides of it called
Mm-hmm.
personality and design. What are those two sides?
So the personality is basically the elements of your design that you might be more conscious and aware of.
Hmm.
And the design, which are going to be all the areas that are red, are the things that you're probably less conscious of, but other people see in you. And so again, that's part of the magic of human design is not only revealing what we know about ourselves, but all the things that we might not see, but others do. And so like just a very tactical example in your design, like you might be more aware of the community piece. Like you might just know that that's part of who you are. Whereas like you might be a little bit less aware of the fact that like you're here to be like a role model and a teacher and a natural authority, but other people kind of might really sense that capacity within you.
Got it. Okay. Really interesting. And like in the big scheme of all this, so there are so many nuances here, right? I'm seeing like lots of numbers and what look like sort of relative scores. So there's like a million combinations here, right? But
Yes.
given that it's around, year, month, day, date, hour, minute, is this something kind of like cyclical? Nature is sort of putting out producing like a number of people who are of a certain type
Yeah.
seasonally, annually? I don't know. Does that question
It
make
it
sense?
it it is such an interesting question. It's not like a thing where, it's like in every 10 years there's a lot of these people and they're all the same design, but like there are interesting times where it can feel like there are times where there are more projectors being born, more manifestors. So like just depending on kind of like the annual pattern. Like even with like so many of my kids, so many of their kids are manifestors, and so I'm just like witnessing anecdotally like kind of like the different phases. But so there are absolutely cycles because the planets are going through cycles, but it doesn't always kind of correspond to this like direct consistency in human design where it's like if you're born in 1987, you might have a similar design as somebody born in like 2003. Like there's often you can't really make those correlations. But there are kind of interesting patterns to look at, of course.
Are there, we talk about generations like Gen X, Gen Y, millennials. Are there sort of generational trends that relate or that you can see show up in human design?
I think that like there needs to be a lot more study on that. I think that like it's been like relatively consistent, just so y'all know the kind of spread in the population. Like generators and manifesting generators collectively make up about 70%,
Okay.
projectors are about 20%, manifestors 9, and reflectors 1. And so like it, and even like when I make these written guides every week, and even when I look at like the spread there, it's often pretty equal to that. So that's kind of like the general population. I do think there are phases where there might be more manifestors, more projectors, but like they're generally kind of within that range. I think that we probably have yet to see the generational stuff, and kind of like how that all manifests, but I think it'd be so curious to kind of, yeah, dig deep into that.
I just thinking about it from the perspective my wife and I were talking yesterday about. I don't remember the name of the author, or I'll get the name of the book wrong, but there's this idea of this 80-year cycle, the four turnings, the fourth turning, that
Mhm.
supposedly we're in right now. But this, everything is cyclical in nature, and this idea that there's sort of like these 20-year cycles that we go through,
Totally. Yes,
where the
yes.
fourth one, yeah, and like a business too, right? You go from the
Yeah.
startup phase to a more mature phase to the phase of decline. And that
Yes.
declining phase, societally or in a business or in life or whatever, can be kind of chaotic. And I
Yes.
just wonder how much, because
Yeah.
uh, political leaders sort of tend to be of a generational age, right? Like,
Hmm.
so I kind of, that was why I was wondering if the
Mm.
age
Yeah.
generation plays into, from a human design perspective, how our country and world are being led.
Yeah, they're definitely like, we're being impacted differently like year by year. And there are kind of longer cycles that we as a society are going through that you can like discover in human design. And we're kind of like edging towards an evolution 2027, which is so much around kind of like really just like beginning to trust ourselves on a much deeper level, and kind of like really letting ourselves be our own, just like really like tapping into your gut, all those things to kind of know how best to use your energy and really kind of have that deep connection to yourself. So it can speak to those cycles in really interesting ways. And similar to just also like what we go through each year, we can see the ways that we're kind of being impacted each year by different planets, by different things, and kind of really just like learning, yeah, what the patterns might be.
Cool. What's that? I want to ask about the reflectors. So if they only make up 1% of the population, what's a reflector like, and how does that show up? How would I recognize one? What are their strengths? What are their challenges?
A little hard to recognize. So reflectors are so basically like if you look at that chart, you'll see that there are areas that are colored in and areas that are white. And the
Mhm.
areas that are colored in are the areas where your energy is more consistent, kind of what you're putting out into the world. And the areas that are white and open are the areas where you are the most sensitive, open, and receptive to other people's energy. And that's what I mentioned earlier, like being in too much of a hurry, like, all that stuff. That's from your open centers. For reflectors, every single center of theirs is white, which means they are taking in and magnifying all the energy that they're around. And so much of the magic of reflectors is that they are incredibly sensitive to their physical space. You really get a good sense of how a team is doing, or company or community, just by how that reflector is showing up. So any reflector I work with, I really just like remind them to be such a ruthless curator of the people and places they're spending time in. I also think the magic of reflectors is in their fluidity. They might have periods where they feel like a manifesting generator, like a projector, like a manifester, and their job is not to be just one thing or honestly figure themselves out, but like really just like honor what feels like them that day and kind of allow themselves to like tap into like all the different possibilities and ways of being. And in the context of business, we call reflectors evaluators because they just have such a different kind of perspective and way of seeing things. They often can see things that a lot of people miss. And so being in an environment and space where their perspective is so kind of recognized and invited in. I always say the ideal job for reflectors like the CEO whisperer, where they're just like in a position where it's just like they're just so valued for their perspective, they can like move their energy around, be super free, and kind of come back and report kind of pretty objectively everything they're seeing. So really like hard to sense who those reflectors are, but like whenever I really have discerned that one person is, I ask them questions all the time. I'm like, and what do you think about this? And what do you see about this? And it's really just so powerful and interesting and useful to hear their perspective. And I find human design is so especially powerful for them because I think they've often been living a life that they can't really articulate and their experience of it. And I think human design validates so much for them in that way.
Yeah, that sounds like a super versatile, powerful type of
Most
personality.
totally. Yeah.
Well, this is all super interesting, Erin. So for people that are also really interested to go deeper, right? You can plug this in, you can kind of see based on your description, some of the you've hit a number of the basics for
Yeah.
some of us, for manifestors, generators, projectors, right? Some high level stuff here. What does it look like to go deeper, right? So let's say I don't necessarily have a corporate team that's interested in
Yeah.
doing this together.
Yeah.
How, can someone just work with you, learn more about themselves and learn more about the other types to start to recognize those without having to have someone be
Totally.
evaluated so that I can
Yes.
just, on the fly, at least get is that sort of the process? Learn more about yourself and then learn to recognize others
Yeah.
around you and how to work with it.
Yeah, I would say definitely start by learning about yourself and then like and you don't need to have a team, so the majority of my clients are really just all individuals, and then I think it can be really interesting to look at like collaborators, look at kids, look at parents, look at friends, look at
Right.
partners, and kind of start to like really notice those differences. So many of my sessions are like partnership sessions that kind of really help business and romantic partners appreciate their differences. So I would start with your design, but I think it's going to make even more sense when you kind of start to look at the designs of others and start to really have a language for maybe things you've always felt, but never kind of quite known how to language or articulate.
Yeah, it seems like there's a real obviously a richness and a value to learning about yourself, but then starting to recognize it in others,
Oh,
qualitatively. You're not gonna, I don't know, maybe somebody's gonna walk up to you in a bar and say, "Hey, what's your human
yeah.
design type?"
Yeah.
But you're not gonna, not gonna go to the next social gathering and say, "Hey, everybody, please come
Yeah.
around, give me your date, minute, time of
I've been
birth,
on the whole,
whatever,
yeah.
before we chat, so I can figure
Yeah.
out how we're gonna talk." Right? Like you got to start
Yeah.
to somehow sense these things in, and to me at least that would be the best way to do it, is learn about myself so I
Yes.
can compare and contrast in what I see to others and start to tune into these things.
Totally. And I'll have so many people be like, okay, I'm a projector. Can I only date this type? And like, that's not really how human design works. It's not like I'm going to create a dating app where it's like, let me match projectors with generators. Like, it's more around the fact that like, once you really have chemistry with somebody, once somebody really feels right, that's the perfect time to kind of dive in and be like, now that we like know that we're in this, whether it's romantic, business, friendship, like let's explore how best to support each other and like how to kind of really understand and honor our differences. So it's not like you're gonna like get along with somebody just because of their design. Like you will know, your body will know if they're right for you. But then like once you have that sense, that's the perfect time to kind of dive into how best to support and collaborate together.
But are there like hard no's, right? Like
I
from
can't do it.
a
No. I can't. I mean, I think that like what I'll say, and it goes so much beyond type because like we haven't even
okay.
talked about this today, but like you can actually layer charts on top of each other where like you can layer two partners charts on top of each other and start to see all the areas in which they're kind of triggering each other, where they really have like kind of like powerful tension, just like all kinds of things. And then you can also
Yeah.
for teams, I layer all the charts on top of each other and start to kind of see where the gaps are and like so many other layers. So like sometimes I'll kind of layer even last week with it was a woman who was looking at the design of her nanny who she was struggling with like their designs like they just like there wasn't much holding them together, you know what I mean?
Mm.
And so it wasn't like they couldn't be together and they weren't seeking to develop like a strong long-term relationship, but it was more that like it would just require a bit more work. And so like I'm just never going to be one to say that like you cannot be in this thing or you're doomed, but I do think some might require more work than others, some might have like a little bit just like things to navigate. But again, like once we understand what the energetic dynamics are, it's so much easier to. And like I'll say, as somebody who's in partnership with somebody who has like basically an incredibly opposite design to me in every single way, human
Yeah.
design has just been the most useful tool to kind of like not make each other wrong for those differences, but really just appreciate and honor them. Be like, this is amazing. I love that you do it this way and that like I would never do it that way, you know? So I think that it really can just be so powerful in relationship.
Yeah, I could see that as being a nice, it's like a third party. It's an unbiased language. We can
Totally.
appreciate each other. And I can really see on a personal level how this would work, but even more so on a business level, you know,
Oh yeah.
we can choose our personal relationships in a business setting. Oftentimes we don't get to choose our team and we may
Yeah.
not be able to change that. But I've been in
Yeah.
partnerships that had so much friction and we see the world so differently that it seems hard to figure out a path to reconcile.
Totally.
But a tool set that would help to work
Yes.
on those things would be super amazing.
Totally. And it just like I think we get so tripped up when we expect someone to be like more similar to us or different than what they are. But I think the minute we really understand how different they are and just appreciate that as like actually a gift, it can really just create so much more compassion and understanding. Like I think it's even really interesting for people to look up like their family's design growing up, like parents, sibling, all those things. I know for me, that was just like so incredibly revealing where I was like, wow, I made them so wrong for being exactly who they were. You know what I mean? So like, it really just, I think it creates understanding the differences, I think brings us actually so much closer together.
Gosh, okay, I gotta ask then, since you brought that up, because that now I want to do that, right? I want to go
Oh
start
yeah.
plugging in family birthdays and stuff. But it's sort of the nature versus nurture question then, right? How much of this is okay, it's innate, we were born with it, but we all learn, we all develop. You mentioned the stages of life. I mean, there's got to be
Yeah.
an environmental element, a developmental element as well.
100%. Yeah. Oh, of course, and this is not to really like, undervalue conditioning because I think actually all the areas that are white in your design are all the areas where you were most likely conditioned. So, like, what's actually
Mm,
so interesting with parenting is that my experience with clients is that you can observe somebody's design so purely when they're young. Like, as kids, they're often expressing it so freely, so authentically. And then we often get really conditioned out of it and like, just like make ourselves wrong for it and spend a lot of our lives trying to be things we're not. And human design is like, oh my God, yes. Like I had so many clients like, that's how I was showing up when I was 5, like that's how I was showing up before all the lessons, all the conditioning. So it's a combination and it's, our life experience informs so much. Human design kind of connects us to a more innate just nature of like how we're designed to do things in a way that works for us, and so that's why like I think we were talking about this before we started recording, but like just the earlier you discover this stuff the better. So again, like I think that I spent a lot of my life trying not to be a projector. I think I was that very much when I was young, but learning it now, I was like, okay, like it's, all those life experiences taught me all the things that don't work, and now I'm going to kind of like move into and evolve into a way of operating that's just going to feel better.
wow. Okay. Yeah, I think I follow you there, and so I'll play it back this way. At least that made sense to me. Is so
Yeah.
I'm pulling this back up here, the human design chart, and you mentioned the areas that are colored are more, I forget the word you used, but then the
Consistent,
white,
reliable.
consistent, and then the white areas are maybe more subject to this development over life, the influences, the environmental stuff. And what a great opportunity to look back at those and try to figure out, we've all got baggage, right? Like
Totally.
where do those traumas, where do they land in these areas and shape these areas?
100%. And who were we conditioned by? Like when we do
Right.
partnership things, we can look at like literally who's conditioning who, like because when the areas are colored in, you're projecting out your energy. When the areas are white, you're taking it all in. So we're all taking all the stuff in, projecting this stuff out. And it's just like, it's so useful to just like understand those things so we can become aware of it and not kind of get lost in other people's stuff as our own.
Gosh. So one more rabbit hole, right? I want to be
Yeah.
respectful of your time. So I keep trying to like wrap up here and I want to
Yeah.
talk more about how people can engage with you. But just the last thing you said there, made me think, and I have a hard time thinking about this in a benevolent way, but there's, so how much is media and entertainment psychologically designed or humanly designed to influence people in those areas that are influenceable or conditionable?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously conditioning and everything in terms of people we spend time with, everything we read, all of it. I think that like we've just got to be really intentional about the resources and stuff we're taking in. Like somebody might be like a hyper empath in their design, and they might find that like reading certain stories or news or watching certain shows just like gives them this like heaviness that they can't let go for a while, or
Mm,
like so
yeah.
it's just like, or somebody like you has an open mind and like say you're like reading the news and seeking certainty and then getting attached to all these theories because of that, probably not going to be very healthy. But if you're like reading the news as a way to kind of like actually explore different perspectives and ways of seeing things that you might not have saw, it actually could probably be amazing. So I think I find that especially in those areas that we can be conditioned, just being aware of it and being kind of recognizing that those pieces allows us to be so much in the wisdom of it, because they're just like the areas that are open are the areas that we have our greatest learning. We have the most to teach, we have the most to share with the world, but it requires that we kind of really learn how to work with it. So yeah, I think that, like, whatever our design, I think being pretty ruthless about the people, the places, the resources, the stuff we're taking in, because it's going to have an impact, and knowing exactly where that might land for us in our design is useful, and kind of helping to know how to deal with those things just like more consciously and in a way that is more sustainable for us.
Yeah, that's amazing awareness to have.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, okay, I will ask the question then. You now live it sounds like you live in a beautiful rural place. How are you working with people these days? So, are you
Yeah.
engaging in person with corporations? If someone wants to reach out to you, is this work done over Zoom? How do you
Yeah.
work?
Yeah. So one of the easiest ways to work with me is I offer something called the blueprint, which is basically a 30+ page written guide to your unique design. So it just kind of covers everything you need to know about your design, and really is meant to make the information just like as actionable and empowering as it can be. And it's meant to honestly just like be an operating manual to you that you can return to. We have a discount code for that. Do you have a word that you like to use for discount codes?
I've seen you use happy before, which is pretty awesome.
Do
Uh,
you want to do
but
mastery for
I
you
don't
or
have
me?
I've when people have tailored one for us, we usually use mastery. So if
Okay,
mastery works
let's
for
do
you, we can do
mastery.
that. Yeah.
Okay. Happy. Yeah, that was Lori Harder. She has a podcast called Earn Your Happy. She's wonderful. So mastery will be the discount code. I also offer private sessions, partnership sessions, team sessions. Everything's on Zoom right now. And then I also offer workshops, which are basically kind of really exploring how to use your design to find more flow in your life. And then someday soon I'll be offering a training as well. So there's a lot to come, but the blueprint's a great place to start or a session.
Okay. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much for the generosity of the
Of
discount on
course.
that. So the blueprint, so I understand what that is. That would take so I've been fortunate, and thank you again.
My
Super
pleasure.
grateful for the chance to have this conversation today. Most people would just plug in the stuff. They're going to get some stuff that looks pretty detailed
Crazy looking.
and
Yeah.
confusing, crazy looking. So the blueprint explains that in some, they can
Yeah.
read it. It's going to make sense. It's probably going to
Yes.
resonate with them. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And it's a lot of people
And
get like, feel
tailored,
like they're
personalized to them.
totally personalized. Like I've made so many thousands and no two are the same. They're all like so different. And it's not meant to like teach you human design. It's not gonna be like, and your son's in this and 20. It's just like it's more like what do you need to know about your design to actually integrate it in your life in terms of how you're designed to make decisions, work with others, biggest areas of learning, your natural strengths, all that stuff, your profile. So like it's really just like meant to really extract the most useful actionable pieces and kind of give it to you as a really accessible doc that you can keep returning to.
Okay, fantastic. And then beyond that would be anything more individualized,
Yes.
consultations with you, doing things as
Yes.
a group, as a family.
Yes, exactly. Family sessions are so fun. Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
Cool.
I'm super interested in this. I'm going out to
Yes.
plug in birth dates for
Yeah,
everybody
yeah. I
now and
gotta look
start
them all
reading this
up.
stuff.
Yeah, amazing. Such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Erin. This is wonderful. It's so interesting. It popped up right at the right time for me. I'm
So
so glad we've had
good.
the chance to have the conversation, and thank you again for your generosity and your knowledge and your time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you again to Erin for her time, generosity to walk me and us through that. How did it feel to you? Did it sound helpful? I wouldn't say it felt like 100% fit to me, but man, this is a pretty good fit there. So, is that real? Is it really onto something? Is it like a horoscope that fits everybody? Is it that general? I don't know. It felt a little more sharp than that, a little more accurate, perhaps. Certainly, whether it's generalized or not, I think there's some helpful insight there. So take away what you will. That was really interesting to explore with Erin. I think for me, at least, I'm going to pursue kind of a deeper interpretation blueprint of that for myself, and read further, look further, explore further about whether it is helpful. So if you guys are interested in doing the same, Erin is super accessible. She has a 10% off discount on her blueprint services for the Man of Mastery community. You can head over and find the link and the discount code for that in the show notes for this episode, manofmastery.com/083 for episode 83, manofmastery.com/083. And Again, I'd remind you, Paul Shepard also was on talking about human design a few episodes ago. I think that's a fairly small community. So if Erin and her style resonated with you, reach out to her. You got links in the show notes to her website and her services. Or, if you feel Paul's your guy, flip back a couple episodes and reach out to Paul. Either way, if this is a potentially helpful tool for you, then hey, put the preconceptions aside and have a look. Might be really interesting. All right, guys, that's it for this week. I want to just circle back to one quick thing on where I started with the candidates for MDK Class 011 that I met with yesterday. If MDK sounds like something that has sparked your interest, I can't say enough good things about it and the organization, the coaches, the men, the brotherhood. So reach out if that has planted a seed with you. Let's talk about it, see if you might be a good fit or a good candidate or might qualify and might benefit from it. That's it for this episode. We got some good ones coming up, so stay tuned. Two weeks down the road, episode 84 coming your way. Until then, get back out there, keep crushing it, see what you can do to grow in those 6 pillars and get after it.